The world often presents us with these profound, really unsettling questions. And fewer is challenging, I think, is seeing innocent people suffer, especially, being killed in conflicts. How do you make sense of that? How does it square with divine justice or some kind of purpose? That's exactly what we're going to try and unpack today for this deep dive. We've pulled together quite a stack of material. We're mainly drawing from divine wisdom, suffering, and the sanctity of life in Islam. It's a source that really weaves together, Quranic verses, authentic sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, the Hadith, and insights from respected Islamic scholars over centuries. So our mission here is to take this, quite intricate worldview and pull out the key ideas. We want to help you understand the different facets of why suffering exists, the deep value placed on life, and how Islamic theology responds specifically to the killing of innocents. It's not a simple answer, definitely multi-layered, but hopefully it offers a different perspectives. Okay, so let's dive in. Our journey starts with a really foundational Islamic idea that life itself is a kind of profound, purposeful test. The Arabic term is ibtila. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, basically it means the very fabric of life, from this perspective, is designed as a continuous examination, a test. Allah is known as Al-Hakim, the All-Wise, and Al-Adl, the All-Just. So this world isn't just random chaos. Every challenge, every bit of ease, it's all part of a, let's say, divine curriculum. It's meant to refine the human soul, to show who is truly sincere, and ultimately to prepare people for eternal reward.
Right, so it's not just about what happens to us, but our response to it. The Quran seems to lay this out pretty clearly. You've pulled some verses for us.
Exactly. How we engage is key. And yes, the Quran speaks directly to this. Take Surah Al-Mulk, chapter 67, verse 2. It says, He who created death and life to test you as to which of you is best indeed. Notice it says best indeed, quality over quantity. It's about the sincerity behind our actions.
Okay, quality, not just quantity. That's interesting. You mentioned another one.
Yes. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 2.155. It's quite explicit. And certainly, we shall test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lives, and fruits, but give glad tidings to us, Sabirin, the patient. See, loss of lives is right there. It's presented as an inherent part, an unavoidable part of life in this temporary world. It's a preparation, really, for believers.
That's quite stark. Trials aren't exceptions, they're expected. And there's another verse, isn't there, about thinking you'll be left alone just because you say you believe?
That's Surah Al-Ankabut, 29, verses 2 and 3. It asks rhetorically, do people think that they will be left alone because they say, we have faith and will not be tested? It really drives home the point that trials are, necessary. They validate the sincerity of faith. They separate those who truly believe from those who just, say the words.
So it's a proving ground, in a sense.
In a way, yes. And it's crucial to remember these tests aren't only about bad things happening. Surah Al-Anbiya 21.35 says, and we test you with evil, and with good as trial, and to us you will be returned. So tests include hardship, difficulties, illness, but also prosperity, ease, health, wealth. Allah observes how we respond in both situations. Are we grateful in good times, patient in bad times? Do we rely on him regardless?
Both sides of the coin. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the deeper wisdom behind these tests, according to the scholars you looked at? It's not just about endurance. Right?
No, not at all. There are profound purposes. One key insight is that suffering, even minor things like the prick of a thorn, is seen as a way to expiate sins. There's a well-known hadith where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, no fatigue nor disease, even if it were the prick he receives from a thorn, but that Allah will expiate his sins by it. And it's also seen as a means to elevate spiritual rank. It's noted that the prophets, who are considered the most beloved to God, were also the most severely tested. This indicates that trials can be a path toward spiritual perfection, higher stations in the afterlife.
So hardship can actually be a purifier, or a way to grow closer to God.
Exactly. It fosters resilience, it can deepen that connection, and it constantly reminds us that this world isn't the final destination. It's temporary.
Okay, so if life is this constant test, what are the tools? What virtues are essential for navigating these challenges, especially the really tough ones?
Two virtues come up again and again: patience, sabr, and trust, tawakkul. Unwavering trust in Allah. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught that the real patience is at the first stroke of a calamity, meaning, maintaining composure right from the start. And another beautiful hadith highlights the believer's perspective. How wonderful is the affair of the believer, for his affairs are all good. If something bad happens to him, he bears it with patience, and that is good for him. It reframes adversity.
Patience right from the start. That's difficult.
It is. But there's also immense reassurance. The Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah 2.286, states clearly, Allah burdens not a person beyond his scope. That means no trial is actually impossible to bear, even if it feels that way. So when you look at suffering through this lens, it shifts. It's not meaningless pain. It can be seen as a form of divine compassion, a way to turn worldly difficulty into eternal gain. It encourages endurance, hopeful endurance, rather than despair.
That framework of life as a test, ibtila, is really powerful. But, okay, it immediately brings up the next big question. Divine justice, especially when we see, truly heartbreaking things like innocent people being killed. How does Allah's perfect justice all fit with that kind of suffering?
That's a central question, absolutely. And Allah's absolute justice, Adl, is a cornerstone of Islamic theology. It's non-negotiable. You see it in Surah Al-Imran 3.18, which simply states, Allah, maintainer of justice. It underscores that everything God does or allows is rooted in perfect fairness and profound wisdom, even if we don't see it immediately. And there's reassurance in Surah Al-Kahf 18.49. And your Lord does not deal unjustly with anyone. This is a promise that on the day of judgment, every single deed will be accounted for. Perfect recompense, ultimate justice for everyone.
Okay, so ultimate justice is guaranteed in the hereafter. But here and now, why do people, humans, abuse their power and cause so much horrific suffering to each other? It doesn't feel like a divine test from God. That feels like human evil.
You're absolutely right to make that distinction. And this is where the concept of human free will is just critical. The Quran is very clear on this. Surah Al-Kahf 18.29 says, the truth is from your Lord, so let whosoever will believe and let whosoever will disbelieve. Humans have been given the freedom to choose. And with that freedom comes responsibility, accountability. So a huge portion of the suffering we see, war, oppression, injustice, murder, it's the direct result of humans misusing that free will, transgressing divine commands.
So God grants freedom, but humans are responsible for the choices they make with it.
Precisely. Surah An-Lan 16.11e puts it starkly. We did not wrong them, but they wronged themselves. It places the blame squarely on human actions for much of the moral evil in the world. Now, there's a deeper theological discussion about how free will works with divine decree, qadar, but the key point here is that Allah's knowledge of events doesn't negate our responsibility. We are accountable. Muslims are commanded to actively fight injustice, not just passively accept things as fate. The evil people do is their responsibility.
Hey, that distinction is crucial. So if a lot of this suffering is human-caused, human evil, what does Islam say specifically about the sanctity of life itself, about the act of unjustly killing innocents?
Islam places immense, really unparalleled value on human life. The prohibition against unjust killing is one of the most serious commandments. Think about the story of Cain and Abel. The first murder, it's portrayed as this foundational, terrible transgression. And there's that powerful statement, often quoted from the sources based on Quranic interpretation, that killing an innocent soul is likened to killing all of mankind, while saving a life is akin to saving all of mankind. That just shows the weight, the sanctity of every single innocent life.
Like killing all mankind. Wow. What about in situations like war?
Even in situations of legitimate defensive warfare, Islam has incredibly strict ethical guidelines. Rules of engagement, these explicitly forbid targeting non-combatants. Women, children, the elderly, priests or monks, anyone not actively fighting, they are protected. So when we see innocents being killed in conflicts, that often represents a serious violation of these core Islamic principles.
That's clear. But what about this difficult, the most heart-wrenching scenario, the death of innocent children? How can theology possibly address that kind of pain and apparent injustice?
That is understandably one of the most painful questions. The theological response here offers a deep source of comfort, actually. There's a strong consensus among scholars, based on religious texts, that any child who dies before reaching the age of puberty, regardless of their parents' faith, is guaranteed paradise. They're often described affectionately as little birds, or little ones of paradise. Their entry is direct, seen as an honor and a clear sign of Allah's encompassing mercy.
Guaranteed paradise.
Yeah.
Regardless of parents' faith.
Yes. And for any innocent person, child or adult, any suffering they endure in this life is viewed either as a purification or, more significantly, as something that directly elevates their eternal reward in the hereafter. It helps to sort of rebalance the scales of perceived injustice. And of course, the loss of a child is also understood as an incredibly profound test for the parents, the family, the community. It can be a catalyst for immense spiritual reflection and growth for those left behind, drawing them closer to God through patience and trust.
That perspective on children is quite profound. Now, you mentioned earlier there's this unique story in the Quran right, about Moses or Musa and this figure Al-Qidr. It apparently sheds some light on hidden wisdom behind seemingly terrible events.
Yes, it's a truly remarkable story in Surah Al-Kahf, chapter 18. Musa encounters Al-Qidr, a figure possessing special, divinely inspired knowledge. In one incident, Al-Qidr kills a young boy. Musa, naturally, is horrified. He protests, "How could you kill an innocent soul? It seems like a monstrous act." But later, Al-Qidr explains. He reveals, and this is based on Laduni, that hidden divine knowledge that this specific boy would have grown up to be a terrible oppressor, a disbeliever who would have caused his devout parents immense suffering, maybe even led them away from their faith.
So the killing prevented a greater future evil.
According to the narrative, yes. But, and this is the absolutely crucial point, scholars emphasize this was a unique, divinely commanded action specific to Al-Qidr based on knowledge inaccessible to ordinary humans. It is not a license for anyone else to act this way. We are strictly forbidden from harming anyone based on guesswork about the future or unseen knowledge. The story serves more as a reminder, perhaps an unsettling one, that divine wisdom operates on levels we can't always perceive. There might be hidden mercy even in what appears to us as tragedy.
A unique case, not a precedent. Got it. Okay, so we've talked about tests, divine justice, human free will, the sanctity of life, even a hidden wisdom. Let's bring it back to the specific issue, the killing of innocent people in different countries. Our sources seem to point to another major factor, something potentially avoidable, rooted in collective human behavior.
Yes, absolutely. A huge factor highlighted, particularly when looking at suffering within the Muslim world historically and today, is disunity. Internal strife, division, fragmentation. It's seen as a major contributor, often a direct cause of vulnerability and widespread suffering. It's often described as a self-inflicted wound.
A self-inflicted wound.
Yeah.
And the Quran warns against this.
Very strongly. The condemnations of division are powerful. Take Surah Al-Imran 3.103 and hold firmly to the rope of Allah altogether and do not become divided. It's a foundational command. Hold on to that divine guidance together. It even reminds believers how unity turned past enmity into brotherhood, a blessing to be guarded.
Hold together, don't split apart. What else?
Surah Al-Anfal 8.46 is very direct about the consequences. And do not dispute, lest you should show weakness and should lose your predominance. It explicitly links internal fighting to collective weakness, losing strength, losing influence on the world stage.
So infighting makes the community weak and vulnerable.
Precisely. And then Surah Al-Hujurat 49.10 reinforces the positive obligation. The believers are but brothers, so make settlement between your brothers. It's not just don't fight. It's actively work to reconcile, to maintain that brotherhood.
It feels like unity is presented as almost intrinsic to the faith itself.
It really is. Verses in Surah Al-Anbiya and Ar-Rum condemn splitting into sects, comparing sectarianism almost to associating partners with God. They emphasize Islam as one single, unified way of life.
And the Prophet Muhammad's teachings, do they echo this?
Absolutely, very powerfully. There's the famous metaphor of the Muslim community, the Ummah, as one body. The Hadith goes, the believers, in their mutual love, mercy, and compassion, are like a single body. If one part of the body feels pain, the whole body responds with sleeplessness and fever. That visceral connection is key. There are also clear prohibitions against things like hatred, envy, backbiting, and even just prolonged estrangement, like not speaking to your brother or sister in faith for more than 3 days. Unity is presented as something Allah is pleased with. Division incurs his displeasure. It's fundamental worship.
One body. That's a strong image. Are there warnings against actively causing division?
Yes, very severe ones. Some traditions mention dire consequences for those who deliberately try to fracture the community, highlighting just how serious causing widespread harm and disunity is considered.
Okay, so if we link this Quranic and prophetic emphasis on unity back to the real world, how does this play out? Historically, or even today, in understanding why innocent people suffer in certain regions?
Well, looking historically, scholars point to clear examples. During invasions, like the early Crusades or the Mongol invasions, internal divisions within the Muslim world often made conquest easier, leading to immense suffering and loss of innocent life. External forces could exploit the internal fragmentation. There's often a clear cause and effect seen between disunity and vulnerability to external aggression or internal collapse.
So lack of unity can directly lead to situations where innocents are killed.
Yes. And the analysis also points to the crucial role of leadership, both religious and political. Leaders can either be forces for unity, bridging divides, or they can exacerbate tensions for their own gain, hindering that collective strength. So the conclusion drawn from these sources is pretty stark. A significant amount of the killing of innocent people in different countries, especially in regions grappling with internal conflict, isn't some unavoidable divine decree. It's often a direct, tragic, but avoidable consequence of the community neglecting these explicit divine commands for unity and brotherhood. It really is, as we said, a self-inflicted wound that requires active healing.
Okay, so let's try to bring all these threads together. We've covered a lot. The Islamic worldview seems to offer this really multi-layered response to suffering and the killing of innocents. We've got suffering as a divine test, ibtila. There's the absolute certainty of Allah's ultimate justice, Al-Adl. There's the huge role of human free will and responsibility for moral evil. There's specific reassurance about the fate of innocents, especially children guaranteed paradise, elevated status. And then there's this devastating but potentially fixable impact of disunity.
That's a good summary. It paints a complex picture, doesn't it? And for you, the listener, grappling with these things, the sources suggest a two-pronged response. First, when faced with suffering that seems unavoidable, part of that divine test, the guidance is patience, Sab, deep, enduring patience. And alongside that, unwavering trust tawakkul in Allah's wisdom, even when it's hidden from us, believing that even hardship holds some spiritual benefit or leads to ultimate good.
Patience and trust in the face of the unavoidable.
Yes. But second, and just as important, is the collective responsibility. The community, the ummah, has a profound obligation to actively strive for unity, to resolve internal conflicts fairly, to uphold justice, to, as the Quran says, enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. This collective effort really rooted in sticking to the core teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah that's presented as the path forward, the way to address the human-caused suffering, the self-inflicted wounds, and to work towards a more just, more harmonious world reflecting those divine values.
So it's both an individual spiritual response and a collective social responsibility. That leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you to reflect on. Consider this. If so much of the suffering we witness is indeed a result of human choices, human failings, and particularly this collective disunity, what then is our active role, yours and mine, individually and together, in actually manifesting divine justice and mercy in the world right now?